Chapter 131, Selective Compassion and Empty Promises. Today's lesson concerns the ethical burden of cursed object containment. Yaga began his mid-morning class lecture and turned to a stack of incident reports piled on his desk. He picked one up and started to go over the contents. Gojo tuned out immediately as Yaga droned on. Gojo watched Geto hunched over his desk, head in one hand, pencil in the other. They were sitting so close, but Geto felt miles away. He'd been sullen and silent all morning, refusing to look him in the eye or to say more than a word or two when Gojo tried to make conversation. Gojo wanted to grab him around the waist and reel him in. How could I have known he was carrying so much worry about getting pregnant? We're not exactly ready right now, no matter how much I want a family. Gojo's eyes traced the slope of Geto's back, up his neck, then to his raven black hair pulled up into a tight bun, tighter than he usually wore it. What if I've been wrong about my vision this whole time and I've been believing a lie? Gojo's hands tightened into fists. I can't not believe the twins are in our future. Suguru is going to be my husband and he's going to bear my children. I refuse any other outcome. Gojo knew this type of thinking was dangerous. Geto had the right to any future he decided for himself, but Gojo's possessiveness made him push forward as if Geto's desires should mirror his own. Maybe that's why Suguru is worried he can't have children. He's only worried about making me happy. But what about his happiness? He says his happiness is being mine, but he doesn't seem happy at all. Someone across the room coughed, and Geto turned towards the sound. It was Nanami. Nanami saw the movement out of the corner of his eye and looked towards their desk. Geto looked back down at his notes. Gojo bristled. Geto had given Nanami more attention in that brief glance than he'd gotten from him all day. The room burst into a flurry of activity as people pulled notebooks and pens out of their backpacks. Yaga had given the class an essay assignment due by the end of the period. Gojo had missed the instructions. He was about to ask Geto what they were supposed to write about when Yaga approached their desk with a manila folder in his hand. Geto looked up from his work. I have your first mission. Yaga handed the folder to Geto. Take an early lunch. The curse activity seems to be more active during daytime hours, and it'll take a while to get there by train. Yes, Sensei, Gojo and Geto answered in unison. Yaga walked away, and Geto opened the file. He wordlessly slid it towards Gojo so they could read it together. Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical College Field Assignment Report. Assigned Sorcerers. Gojo Satoru, Special Grade Sorcerer. Geto Suguru, Special Grade Sorcerer. Classification, Grade 3 Curse Activity, Escalation Risk Currently Low. Requested Response Window within 24 hours. Location, Residential District, Chiba City. Administrative Notes. This assignment has been approved as a reintegration field operation for Geto Suguru following return to active duty. Mission oversight delegated to Gojo Satoru. The rest of the report detailed the homeowner's complaints of repeated footsteps from the second floor of the house, sliding doors opening without cause, lights activating in empty rooms, a figure reportedly visible in the second floor window. The homeowner had recently put his house up for sale, and the strange occurrences had doubled in frequency, making it impossible for prospective buyers to tour the house without being spooked. The complainant had submitted multiple requests over the previous week and demanded an immediate response due to unsafe living conditions and sleep disruption. Gojo was still reading the last few sentences of the report when Geto turned to pack his school supplies back in his bag. He stood up and waited for Gojo. Their footsteps sounded unusually loud as they made their way down the empty school halls. In as few words as possible, Geto agreed to Gojo's suggestion to get lunch from a convenience store near the train station. He wanted something hot to eat and microwaved a container of pasta with creamy miso sauce, while Gojo sat down at a small table with a spicy chicken sandwich, 4 different types of onigiri, and a bottle of strawberry soda for his lunch. By the time Geto sat down to eat, the chicken sandwich was already eaten, and Gojo was on his 3rd onigiri. Gojo's eyes were drawn to Geto's hand. the shiny black polish on his fingernails catching the light every time he maneuvered his chopsticks from the plastic bowl to his mouth. Geto noticed him looking. The apples of his cheeks turned pink. Gojo took advantage of this small vulnerability. Suguru, I know you're mad at me, but this is our first mission back. We have to get our heads in the game. What makes you think my head's not in the game? Geto snapped. Because this isn't us. Even before, if we had disagreements, we could still be professional on the job, Gojo explained. We're not even on site yet, and you're already assuming I can't do my job? Geto said, voice rising. For fuck's sake, Suguru, why are you so goddamn angry with me? Gojo asked, finally exasperated. Geto put his chopsticks down, leaned against the back of the plastic chair and rubbed his temples with his thumb and forefinger. He closed his eyes for a moment. Satoru, I'm sorry. Geto reached out for Gojo's hand on the table. He grabbed it tight. I'm sorry. Gojo softened at the touch he'd waited all day for. Geto's mind had been going nonstop since last night. He didn't know where to place his doubts, his grief, his frustration, so he'd chosen silence. And now that he had a chance to explain, the words wouldn't come. I'll be okay on the job, I promise. I think I just need to eat and maybe nap on the train. I'm exhausted, Geto said lamely. Gojo saw through the excuses, but he decided to let it go. Arguing right before their mission wouldn't be in the best interest of either of them. You want the last one? Gojo pushed the fourth onigiri towards Geto. Geto picked up his chopsticks again. No, go ahead. He continued to eat, feeling a little less frayed, but still guarded. And you can lean on me if you fall asleep on the train. That's an hour and a half of napping you can get in, Gojo suggested. Yeah, that sounds good. I can't believe we'll be back in Chiba so soon after Christmas break. I should have just kept the rental car, Gojo grinned. This brought a small but genuine smile to Geto's face. Can you imagine stopping by my parents' house like, hey mom and dad, we were just in the neighborhood to exercise some curses and thought we'd drop by to say hello, Geto joked. Gojo laughed. He unwrapped the last onigiri and ate it while Geto finished his noodle dish. They walked to the train station a little more relaxed, putting the reasons for their earlier tension on the back burner for the time being. It would take 2 trains to get to their destination. Geto sat by the window and put his arms around the backpack in his lap, using it as a makeshift pillow. I'll wake you up before we have to transfer, Gojo said, settling next to him. My shoulder is always here if you need something to lean on. Okay, Geto said, closing his eyes as the train lurched forward. At their destination, they had a bit of walking to do to get to the neighborhood listed in the file's coordinates. Geto was groggy from napping and welcomed the opportunity to get his blood pumping to help him wake up. Gojo checked his phone to make sure they were heading the right way. The area didn't look much different from Geto's parents' neighborhood. The houses were a little newer here. They stopped in front of a property that had a for sale sign. The kids next door were playing in their yard. They stopped and stared as Gojo and Geto walked up the homeowner's driveway. The house next door had a reputation for being haunted. The homeowner opened the door before either sorcerer could even knock properly. Finally, he exclaimed, clearly frustrated. Special services sent you, right? Not bothering to wait for confirmation, he opened the door wider to let the 2 inside. Do you know how much sleep I've lost because of this? He continued ranting. What are we paying our taxes for if I have to call half a dozen times just to get you out here? Geto stepped forward and bowed politely. We apologize for the delay, he said in a low, placating tone. Gojo side-eyed him. The delay wasn't their fault, and Geto sounded overly sincere. Gojo heard this tone before. It was the tone Geto had when someone was trying his patience and he was doing his best not to snap. We reviewed the complaint and will proceed accordingly. We humbly ask for your own safety that you wait outside while we work. Gojo took over while Geto started surveying their surroundings. The homeowner rolled his eyes at Gojo's request, but he stepped outside without a word and shut the door firmly behind him. I'll take second floor. The presence seems to be stronger up there. You good? Gojo asked, heading towards the stairs. Yeah, I might be able to take out the ones down here with cursed flame manipulation, Geto told him. Gojo stopped in his tracks. It's better than you having to absorb them, but do you have enough fuel for that? My arsenal's been untouched for months. I can cover this assignment. Geto tried not to use cursed flame manipulation too often. It depleted his cursed spirits reserves quickly, which meant he would have to consume and absorb more curses to replenish his supply. I'm good, Satoru, Geto assured him. Gojo nodded and ran up the stairs. With Gojo's presence elsewhere, Geto knew what came next. Cursed spirits began to manifest out of the corners of the house, ceilings, and from behind doors. Geto waited. Curses always reacted to him. They were drawn to him. He wondered what it was they saw in him. He felt one brush up against his sleeve. He heard a whisper from another. Will you stay? Geto heard a flash from Gojo's blue coming from somewhere upstairs. Gojo's slow footsteps creaked as he continued patrolling. Geto waited for more curses to surround him. Does this mean you'll stay? Asked that same voice when Geto didn't react. He looked at the various shapes undulating around him and decided it was time. I'm not your friend, but I won't let you suffer either, Geto told them as he unleashed cursed flame from his outstretched palms. The mass around him quickly combusted into blue fire with barely a shriek. It was a small success, but it drained his own physical energy and ate away at his cursed spirit reserves. Geto stood in the center of the room in case there were more curses hiding, but he couldn't detect anything remaining in the living room. I don't even know if they're doing anything. The homeowner's voice floated into the house from an open window. It's too quiet, and they're taking forever. He was telling someone over the phone. Geto clenched his fists. Ungrateful monkeys, he thought. The words came too fast, too easy. So did the hate. He reached for the blue onenju he kept in his pocket. The cool, smooth beads felt comforting against his fingertips. Breathe. Focus on the mission. Have compassion. Let go of the anger. The onenju tassels felt soft against his palm. He pulled his hand out of his pocket and continued to the dining room and kitchen area. There were curses hiding here, too. Geto waited out the curses again, knowing that something about his presence would draw them out of hiding. He felt a tug at his pant leg. Something settled on his hair bun, and he flicked it off. If they were stronger curses, he would never let them near him like this. He started to hear the whispers again, whispers that even Gojo couldn't hear. You'll stay, won't you? We won't be lonely if you stay. Geto looked at the curses writhing around him. You're afraid of being lonely? He asked, raising his hands. Well, so am I. Blue flames emitted from Geto's palms. Don't be scared. You're the lucky ones here. You'll never have to feel lonely again. Fire engulfed the curses in seconds. Geto looked at the empty space around him after the flames died away and hung his head. He spotted a movement in the corner of his eye and turned. Gojo was there. He met his gaze. Gojo froze. It gave him goosebumps to see Geto surrounded by curses that were drawn to him, not to attack, but to seek refuge, and Geto spoke to them as if they understood. Suguru, Gojo murmured. How's the rest of the house? Geto asked, ignoring the look on Gojo's face. Gojo was quiet for a moment. Nothing else detected. Let's go then. I can't stand it here, Geto said, leading the way back out of the house, only pausing to grab the backpack he left by the front door. The homeowner was still on his phone, pacing the sidewalk. He looked up at the two as they crossed the yard. Well, he asked, not even bothering to pause his call. All clear, Gojo told him. The homeowner made a sound as he put the phone back to his ear and started back up the walkway to his house. You better hope all this craziness is over. I don't want to have to contact you again, he called over his shoulder before he walked through the door. You won't have to, Gojo started to say, but the door slamming shut cut him off. Geto stared at the front door of the house, eyes flashing with anger. I've been gone all this time and nothing's changed. They're still as ungrateful as ever, causing their own problems and not caring if someone else has to pick up the pieces. Geto felt a gentle touch to his elbow. Suguru, it's over. Let's go, Gojo prodded quietly. Geto silently seethed through the long train ride back to school. All the old feelings from before now festered like a new wound. Dealing with civilians is just as bad as dealing with the curses, but I can't let myself become this angry every time we go on a mission, Geto thought. Gojo watched Geto stare out the window at nothing, fingering the blue beads of the onenju hanging from his wrist. Their first mission back from Geto's reinstatement was a success on paper, but Gojo couldn't help feeling like they'd also failed something too. Only one mission in, and he's already this frustrated, Gojo worried. The platform was crowded when they disembarked the train. They made their way downstairs. Gojo started towards the school, but Geto didn't follow. He turned back and stepped out of the flow of the crowd. What's the matter? Gojo asked. I'm going to the temple, Geto told him. I need to decompress. Oh, yeah, sure. What about the report? Gojo asked, feeling reluctant about letting him go. You're in charge. You can cover for me, right? I'll make it up to you on the next one. Geto tried to smile, but it fell flat. Yeah, no problem. Gojo hesitated. What about dinner? He asked, stalling. Go on without me. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be. Geto turned to walk in the opposite direction, leaving Gojo alone in the crowd, a sinking feeling in his stomach. Geto sat across the desk from Saito-sensei. He let the calm temple atmosphere tamper down his frayed nerves. Steam rose like incense smoke from the teacup set in front of him. Was today difficult? Saito-sensei asked gently. Geto looked away for a moment. I thought I knew what compassion meant. He turned back to the priest. But I'm starting to understand it less and less. He reached for the teacup as if he meant to take a sip. Then he let his hand fall back in his lap. Why should I keep giving kindness to people who resent being saved? Compassion becomes more difficult once we expect people to deserve it, Saito-sensei replied. Shouldn't some people deserve it more than others? Geto pushed back, defensive. There are people who make compassion easy, and some who will make it feel impossible. But if compassion only exists for some and not for others, it becomes preference. Geto remembered the way he used to sort people out, sorcerers and non-sorcerers. He used to secretly refer to non-sorcerers as monkeys, foolish beings who couldn't use jujutsu powers, beings he used to think were below him. He didn't want to become that person again. We help them, but they look at us like we're inconveniencing them. Saito-sensei nodded knowingly. Yes, he agreed. Geto finally took a sip of tea. The taste mild, soothing. You seem tired, Geto-san, Saito-sensei observed. Geto gave him a sad smile. He set the teacup down and picked up his backpack. I am, he answered quietly. Before leaving the temple, he stopped to offer incense. The pews in the gaijin were empty. He walked slowly down the aisle towards the image of Buddha. Incense smoke rose from the koro. He bowed and looked up. The Buddha leaned toward him, the look in its eyes serene, seeming to recognize the pain Geto carried. Geto took a pinch of powdered incense and dropped it into the koro. A fresh plume of smoke appeared and floated towards the ceiling. He put the onenju beads over his hands. Namo Amida Butsu, he said, meaning to recite it 2 more times. But he felt a catch in his throat, and tears began to stream down his face. Tears were safe here. There would be no one to urge him to stop crying. No one he had to turn his face away from. He didn't have to pretend he was okay. He let himself feel what he needed to feel. There were no words, just tears, just emotion he wanted to let go. Hate, resentment, doubt, anger, fear. Those emotions were starting to crowd out the love he had for Gojo, and that scared him most of all. But those emotions were an excuse, a shield to protect him in case he lost everything, a defense in case he couldn't give Gojo the things he wanted and he ended up alone again. Then he'd be able to say his anger was justified. When the tears finally subsided, Geto wiped his eyes and looked up at the Buddha. He bowed and turned to leave. He looked over his shoulder one last time. "There's a way out of suffering, right?" he asked softly. He knew the answers to these kinds of questions didn't come easily. Neither did the solutions. He walked out of the temple, back to campus, the tiniest bit of weight taken off his shoulders. Back at the dorm, Gojo sat at his desk, noisily tapping away at his laptop, finishing up the mission report. He reread it a few times and emailed it to Yaga. He also sent him a text, in case the higher-ups were waiting to hear how Geto's first mission went. Geto's face smiled back at him from his phone wallpaper. Gojo found himself smiling back. Then he saw the time. He tried not to worry. He tried to fight the urge to go to the temple and wait. He didn't want to seem possessive and insecure. "That's exactly what I am, though," Gojo admitted to himself. He debated getting another slice of the pizza he'd brought home to share, knowing that Geto wouldn't remember to stop for food on his way back. But he wasn't hungry anymore. He was just trying to fill the time. He ran his fingers over the beaded bracelet around his wrist, a self-grounding method he'd learned from Geto. He heard shuffling footsteps outside the door, and the knob turned slowly. Geto came in, taking off his shoes, hanging his coat and scarf from the door hook. He dropped his backpack to the side. "Hey," he greeted Gojo. He's been crying, Gojo thought, the knot in his stomach returning. "Hey," he said back. Geto turned his back and started to undress. "Did you eat yet? There's leftover pizza," Gojo offered. Geto glanced at him. "Maybe later." He headed towards the bathroom to shower. Geto leaned against the tile wall as the hot water cascaded over his body. "I rushed home to come back to Satoru, but I couldn't reach out for him like I wanted. I'm doing it again. My heart wants him, but I push him away. Why can't I just let myself be loved?" Gojo was in bed scrolling on his phone. Geto stepped out of the bathroom, busying himself with tidying up the room, putting the leftover pizza away, but not eating. Gojo set his phone down and turned to the wall, pulling the comforter up over his shoulders. Geto shut the lights off, but hesitated getting into bed. He suddenly felt guarded. He didn't want anyone to touch him or talk to him. Geto glanced at the empty bed across the room. "I don't want to be touched, but I don't want to be alone either. And that would hurt Satoru's feelings if I went back to my own bed." Finally, he lifted the covers from Gojo's bed and crawled underneath, trying to stay small and not disturb him. He turned his back, exhausted and emotionally raw, hoping sleep would find him quickly, praying he'd be able to cope better tomorrow. Gojo turned over. Geto held his breath. He felt him shift closer. "Please don't," Geto begged. But Gojo wrapped an arm around him. Geto's shoulders stiffened, but Gojo's embrace was warm and strong. Geto felt his defenses slowly come down. "Suguru," Gojo said, "I know you reject love to protect yourself, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to let the world take you from me again." Geto didn't reply, but he grasped the arm that curled around his body and held Gojo's hand to his lips. Fresh hot tears sprung in his eyes. Those words that used to comfort him were starting to sound like empty promises.